Hello everyone. You may have recently seen my labour and birth story with my second son, and if you haven't seen that one and you would like to watch, then I will leave it linked down below for you. After filming that video, I had a couple of requests to film a video about the honest truth behind labour and birth, because as first-time mums especially, you often don't know what you're quite going into. You aren't prepared as such, even if you take hypnobirthing courses. I remember doing an antenatal course when I was pregnant with my first son, and the leader actively hinting that actually she hadn't told us everything to expect, because I think that people don't want to scare you. And I know that I wished that somebody had told me some of these things, even though some of them are not things that are necessarily pleasant. If you are like me and you like to be prepared for things, then hopefully this video will help you out. Just as a disclaimer, not all of these things are negative things. Some of the things that I'm going to share with you that people don't tell you about labour and birth are actually positive things and things that you can use to help you have a better experience. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is one of those positives, and it is the fact that you can take pretty much whatever you like into the hospital with you when you're having a baby. Now, I am basing this on my own experience and the experience of lots of my friends. I live in the UK, and it may be different depending on which country you live in. But certainly here in the UK, you are free to take lots of different things into the hospital with you. One of the reasons is because they don't really provide you with very much in the hospitals in the UK. It's not like in countries like America, because obviously your insurance pays for it, you get a lot of added extras. In the UK, you really don't get given a lot when you go into hospital for your labour and childbirth. You will just want to check with your hospital or your midwife that you are allowed to take the things that I'm about to talk about, but certainly in my experience, there was never any problem. It's really important when you're in labour to set the scene, to make yourself feel calm, so you can take things like your own music. You can take music players, so you can have your iPod with you if you want to. I would recommend wireless headphones if you do take one of those, but you can also take like a CD player or music player to have the music played out loud in the room as well. You can often take candles with you. My hospital did allow you to take candles. I know some don't because of the fire hazard, but you can take battery operated candles. You can also take battery operated fairy lights to just create that nice ambiance. And if you want to create a nice smell in the room, then taking some room spray is a really good idea as well. You can mist it on your pillow and make it smell nice. You can take your own pillow as well, which is often a home comfort. You are allowed to take in your birth ball, your pregnancy ball, if you have one. Some of the hospitals do have these available, but it's not always guaranteed that you will get one if they're all being used. So you might want to just take your own. Something that I didn't know about until this time is that you're also allowed to take not only your own snacks and drinks, which I knew about, but things like ice lollies to put in the freezer on the labour ward. I got very, very dehydrated in my labour and birth with my first son, and so my midwife advised me this second time around that I was actually allowed to take ice lollies with me to help me stay hydrated throughout labour and birth. They're obviously really easy to just hold in your hand and quick to eat, but they will quench your thirst rather than having to keep on drinking all the time. When I questioned where we would store these ice lollies and wouldn't they melt, she said that it was absolutely no problem when you arrive to give them to the midwife, and they will put them in their freezer and then bring them out to you when you need them. Let's talk about pain relief. You know that being in labour hurts, and you know that even if you've never had a baby before, it's common knowledge, and some people do talk about the fact that there are surges and their waves of intense feeling. That's hypnobirthing talk rather than actual pain. And if you want to do hypnobirthing, then that's absolutely amazing. I did practice hypnobirthing with both my boys, although I wouldn't say that it particularly helped me in my labour and births, but that is very subjective. However, I am here to tell you that being in labour does hurt quite a lot. But there are things that you can do to temper the pain, to kind of give yourself some pain relief and to take your mind off it. one of the main things that I used that I had never heard about before being pregnant with my first son was a TENS machine. So a TENS machine is something that sends little electromagnetic waves, I think, like little electric shocks basically, into your back. It has little pads and you stick them on your back and you have a little handheld controller, and basically you can control the intensity of them. If you aren't in labour, it actually really hurts. My husband tried it out. They do hurt, but when you're in labour, it's like it's one of those things like if your leg hurts and you pinch your finger, your leg doesn't hurt quite so much because your mind can't focus on two things at once. So actually having those little shocks in your back, it sounds horrible, but actually it feels really nice. It's like somebody putting pressure and pressing on your back where it hurts. One of the things to remember with a TENS machine is that they don't really work unless you put them on right at the start of your labour. So as soon as you know that you're going into labour, whether you're maybe induced or whether you go into labour naturally, put them on your back, have a practice before you ever go into labour so you know where they need to go, and get your birthing partner to practice with you. And then make sure that you put them on early on, because if you wait too late, they don't really have any effect. But if you put them on early on and then use them to build up, you can use them basically for your entire labour and just ramp up the intensity as you go along. And honestly, it really, really helps. You don't have to even buy a TENS machine if you don't want to. You can hire them. I think Boots have a hiring service, and there are a couple of other places as well. Water is also an awesome pain reliever. I went in the birth pool with my first son. I wanted to with my second, but I couldn't. But before I even went in the pool, I went in the bath, and that hot water poured onto your stomach with a jug, that was my husband's job, is really, really nice. There are lots of other pain relief methods, and I'm sure that your midwife will go through them all with you, and I won't do that now in this video. But just to say that if you are interested in getting an epidural, it's worth bearing in mind that it can take up to 2 hours to get your epidural from when you first ask for it, because they have to call the anaesthetist. The anaesthetist may be busy with other people, they have to get round to you, they have to prep you, give you all the information about the risks and the side effects. So it can take a really long time to get your epidural. If you do want one and you go into labour and birth knowing that you want one, it's worth asking really early on, and also bearing in mind that even if you ask really early on, you still may not get one. I did want an epidural with my second baby, and I asked for it before I ever even went into labour and birth. It was on my birth notes, and as soon as we got to the hospital, I reminded the midwives that I did want an epidural this time, but I still didn't get one because my labour was quite fast, and basically they just didn't have the time to prep everything before Rupert was born. Gas and air is a common pain relief here in the UK. I don't particularly like gas and air because it makes me feel quite sick. But I did really like being able to bite down on the mouthpiece that goes into your mouth. The actual gas and air, I don't feel like really did anything for me, but I think it just makes you think about your breathing, and it's something else to do. So I wouldn't rule it out as a possibility. It is worth bearing in mind though that when you start to push, they will take the gas and air away from you. So if you don't have any other form of pain relief at that point and they take the gas and air away from you, you will be au naturel from that point on for pushing however long it takes you. Let's talk about pushing then. I didn't ever realise that pushing could take quite so long. It doesn't always, it totally depends on you, and if this is your first baby, which I imagine it probably is if you're watching this video, then it's worth knowing that pushing can take up to 3 hours, which is totally not what they show you on the films and the TV, is it? 3 hours, which is a long time. They give you 3 hours, and then after that you start talking about other options for helping to get the baby out. I pushed for 2 hours with my first son, and then he was delivered in an assisted delivery with a ventouse, which is like a little suction vacuum that they help to get them out. That's because he was tangled in his cord and didn't want to come out as I was pushing, which I think was probably one of the reasons why I was pushing for so long. But a lot of my first time mum friends have also got very similar stories about pushing for several hours. On the flip side, with my second baby, I pushed for 6 minutes. So it really does depend on you and your own labour and birth. Everybody's is very different, but it can take a long time to push. Just because your labour takes a long time, and if it's your first baby, it may take you 24 hours, even longer, not necessarily, it could just be a couple of hours, but however long it takes, the time will pass for you, not your birth partner, but for you, the time will pass really quickly. So don't go into labour and birth worrying that you're going to be in this pain or having these intense feelings or being uncomfortable for so many hours, and how am I ever going to cope with doing it for this many hours, because you really do go into your own zone and you totally don't realise how much time has passed by. So although yes, you're feeling uncomfortable and you're in pain at times, you don't feel like it's going on for hours and hours on end. I was actually in the birth pool with my first son for 6 hours, and I didn't realise at all. When my husband told me afterwards how long I'd been in there for, I was completely shocked. I thought I'd been in there for about an hour and a half. So it really does warp your perception of time, but in a good way. You may have heard people talk about the ring of fire, and that is the point when you're basically pushing the baby's head out. So if you imagine that this is you and this is your baby's head that's trying to get through this hole, and then obviously you have to open to let your baby's head through, that stretches you out completely, and that is what's called the ring of fire, and it's kind of infamously known as being the most painful part of labour and childbirth. Now, I did not actually find this that painful. Yes, it does hurt, it does, but it doesn't last for very long at all. It lasts for about a maximum, and my midwife told me this, so I'm not making it up, it lasts for a maximum of about 6 to 7 seconds. So I just kept that in my mind when I was pushing and I got to that ring of fire stage. It really doesn't last for very long at all. So anybody can kind of take a very intense feeling of pain or not nice feeling for just 6 or 7 seconds, and then once that feeling's gone, basically your baby's here. So it's a really positive thing to keep in your mind, that although you're experiencing that pain, just think it's only going to last for these few seconds, and once it's finished, I've done it and the baby's here. I think that that's a really positive way of thinking about it, and something that I hope won't scare you too much, because people do talk about the ring of fire as being this terrifying, scary thing. Once your baby is born, you may have some small tears or grazes, but you don't always have to have stitches. So depending on how big the tears or grazes are, depends on whether you have to have stitches and how many you have to have. If you have just a small tear or a small graze, you don't actually have to have stitches, and that's something I think to be celebrated, because truth be told, stitches are horrible. They're not a nice experience. I really did not enjoy getting my stitches at all. It hurts. I was given gas and air for my stitches, and I used it because I didn't like it. It lasts for quite a long time, depending on how many stitches you have to have, obviously. I had a 2nd degree tear when I had my stitches with my first son. I didn't have any stitches with my second, but with my first, I had a 2nd degree tear, which is not the worst type of tear, and the stitches still did last for quite a long time. It's definitely an experience that I was glad not to have to repeat the second time. Sorry if that's negative, but I am sharing with you the honest truth. I mentioned before that my first birth was an assisted birth, and the doctor used a ventouse to get the baby out. Having an assisted birth is sometimes classed as a negative thing, but in my experience, having an assisted ventouse birth was not a negative experience at all. It actually really helped, because I was pushing for a long time, he wasn't coming out, and as soon as the doctor used the ventouse, I could really suddenly feel things moving, and that was great, because finally something was working to get the baby out. It did hurt a little bit when he put the ventouse onto Finley's head, because it's quite big, I think, and they have to kind of like get their hand in there to be able to put it on their head, because obviously the baby's head is not out yet. So that bit did hurt and was uncomfortable. I don't have any experience with having forceps, but I do have some friends that have had forceps deliveries, and it is worth bearing in mind that sometimes with forceps, it may be all the time. Obviously, I'm no medical expert, but you do have to go into theatre, surgery, to have forceps deliveries. But with a ventouse assisted delivery, generally you just stay in the room that you're in. I'm sure you will have been told before that having a birth plan is a wonderful thing to do, because it really gets your mind around the different options that you're given when you go into labour and birth. But it is worth bearing in mind that your birth plan really won't necessarily go to plan. I'm not sure that anybody's birth plan really goes to plan, not 100% anyway, It's worth having it there though. As I mentioned briefly, I wanted an epidural with my second. I didn't have that. I wanted to go in the pool. I didn't have that. With my first child, I wanted to give birth in the pool. I couldn't do that, although I was in the pool for quite a long time. So you do have to change, and it depends on you, it depends on your baby and what's happening with them. When you are monitored, you can't be in the pool. So you may have to be monitored and have, you know, the bands that they put around your stomach to test the baby's heartbeat. You may even have to have what they call a clip, which is like a little thing that they just put under the skin on your baby's head, and that measures, I think, the baby's blood pressure or heartbeat, I'm not quite sure, but it measures something to do with the baby. So you may have to have that, and obviously they put that inside you to put it on the baby's head. So if you have those kind of monitorings, then you can't be in the pool. You have to be on a bed generally when you're in the throes of labour. So with my second child, I was being monitored and I couldn't get off the bed. I actually was told that I had to stay on the bed the entire time, and I had to stay on my left side for most of the time as well, because that was where they could track his heartbeat the best. So I wasn't even allowed to go up on my back or up on my knees or on my right side. I was told that I had to stay on my left side, which was not the most comfortable position by any means, and not the position that I naturally wanted to be in. Bodily functions. It's something that I think that we're all a bit terrified of when it comes to labour and birth, and it is a bit gross, isn't it? But yeah, you poo when you're giving birth generally, and I have heard tales from midwives that say that basically everybody poos, and if you've heard from people that say that they don't, then it's probably that the midwife just kind of swept it away, no nonsense, and didn't say anything, and you just didn't realise. Saying that, I am almost positive that I did not with my second child, but I definitely did with my first. It's such a horrible thing to think about, isn't it? And I was actually mortified because I was aware of what was going on, and I think I was more mortified that my husband was there watching. It's not a nice experience, but you know, he totally didn't care, and they just watch you being an absolute warrior, and I'm sure that they do not care that that happens. You can't help it. There's literally nothing you can do. So I guess worrying about it is pointless, because if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Similarly to pooing, you may also wet yourself. You probably would not even be aware of this, to be honest, if you did. And you may also be sick. That's actually a really common thing to happen when you're in labour, to throw up. Gas and air makes you feel sick if you have gas and air, but even if you don't, just I think your body preparing for labour. And when you get to a certain stage of labour, I think it's the transition stage, when you get to about 6 centimetres, it's really, really common for you to throw up. If you're planning on having a pool birth, one of the things that you actually have to take to the hospital that you may not find on many hospital lists, but they did actually ask for this when I was in the hospital, when I got into the pool, you have to take a sieve with you. And do I have to say what the sieve is for? I think you can maybe imagine what the sieve is used for. Yeah, you have to take your own sieve with you. So just bear that in mind. That's totally gross, isn't it? And something that I definitely did not know about. There's a common saying that with labour and childbirth, you leave your dignity at the door. I don't necessarily think that you leave your dignity at the door, but you certainly leave your sense of embarrassment, I would say. I am quite a shy, introverted person. I'm definitely not an extrovert. I don't like being around loads of people. I certainly don't like sharing personal, private things with people, which is you may think is odd considering I'm making this video for you all. But when you are in labour and giving birth, you totally do not care who sees you. You obviously have everything on show, and you honestly won't care. I know that a lot of people think that, but I will care because I know me. You won't. You won't care who sees you. You won't care if you're naked. I was naked when I gave birth to my first child, and I didn't even give it a second thought, to be honest, because I was hot. And I just wanted to be as cool as possible, and that was the way I was going to be, as cool as possible. I just totally didn't care. And I am 100% not the type of person to be naked in front of people. I don't do topless sunbathing or anything like that on holiday even. I'm very much a, keep myself covered up person, but I just didn't care, and you won't care. So try not to worry about that too much and think, oh, what am I going to wear and what am I going to have to cover myself up? Because when your mind is on other things like pushing a baby out of your body, you will not care who sees you. The last thing to bear in mind is that it's different for everyone. Different depending depending on which country you live in, which hospital trust you fall under, different depending on you and your baby and what happens during your labour and birth. I truly believe that no two labour and birth stories are the same. So although I can tell you these things and you can watch a million labour and birth videos, which I would recommend doing because it does get your mind around some of those things, you really cannot prepare fully for your own labour and birth because you just don't know what's going to happen. But guaranteed that at the end of it, you will have your baby and it will be wonderful, and in a few months, you will have forgotten all about all the negatives and all you will remember is the wonderful, positive afterglow that you were left with after your labour and births. I've done it twice, and you know what? I would do it again because the thing that you get out of it at the end, your baby, is just the most amazing part of the whole experience. It's such an empowering experience. It makes you feel like an absolute heroine goddess after you've done it. Everybody is pandering to your needs. You have just literally pushed a baby out of your body and you just feel amazing. So you do kind of bask in that wonderful feeling of afterglow. I was also told at my antenatal class that after you have your baby, your levels of oxytocin, which is one of the happy hormones, is at the highest that it will ever be in your whole life. So that's something to really look forward to. I am going to be starting a series on things no one tells you about. So I'm planning on doing a video on the things no one tells you about pregnancy, having a newborn and postpartum as well. If you're interested in those, then make sure that you subscribe. I do lots of videos on everything to do with baby life and baby play as well. So if you're interested, if you're having a baby, then it may be something that you want to stick around for. Thank you very much for watching this video, everybody, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.